Hey everybody, Jake here. By the time you see this video, I'm gonna be on a little break. I have not taken time off from YouTube since January of 2023, and I could really use some R&R. Also, I just got engaged to my best friend in the whole world, and we want to spend some time together. I'm still thinking about all of you guys during this time, however, so I curated this enormous video. In today's compilation, I want to look back at some of the biggest releases of 2025. I also threw in some exclusive members-only reviews for both Screamboat and Companion that have only been made public now. So even if you have seen every single review I've put out in 2025, there is some new stuff here. Become a member today if you want to see even more exclusive review videos just like these that are popping up on screen now. So without further ado, let's revisit some of the spookiest horror releases that 2025 has to offer so far.
Daddy's tapping out.
Oh, this daddy ain't tapping out just yet, Buster. We gotta talk about this new short film. I just released my first original film, Chicken Man. It premiered on my studio's page, Human Egg Productions. Go give it a watch here on YouTube before getting into today's review. Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Chicken Man is the first original short film from writer-director Jake Tyler, hatched alongside his incredible writing partner, Connor Caligaris. The short stars some familiar faces from his lousy Scream fan film Red Right Hand, like Darjon Bentley and Ali Russell. Some newcomers include Eric Harness, who some of you may recognize from The Bearded Entertainment, and my nephew Troy Conway in his first film role. Shout out to my buddy Johnny Krasinski, no, not John Krasinski, who plays news reporter Kim Sprinkler. A name I am still laughing about to this day. Although Chicken Man appears to be this extremely campy B-movie, the goal here was to add a level of sophistication with a tragic villain. I wanted to do something similar to Brundlefly, where he's clearly a monster by the end of the story, but you sympathize with him nonetheless. From the news report playing throughout the film, you learn that under the mask there's a widowed father who lost his entire family after one unfortunate accident.
This accident that happened outside of St. Peter's Chapel unfortunately took 2 lives, Sarah Zimmerman, age 36, and her son, Billy, age 11.
Now he's taking revenge on the truck driver that proclaims he couldn't stop before he gets his head bashed in. The story goes further than that, though, with what appears to be an apparition of his dead son leading him into the house of an unsuspecting couple in the middle of the night. That's all I'm gonna say about the boy for now, though. If we get to do a feature, maybe you'll learn more about who or what that is. The concept is what made me spend nearly my entire savings on this 10-minute short film, but I think the music is one of the strongest parts. My family and I were heavily inspired by Zombie from 1979 when composing a lot of it. My father is responsible for the droning synth, my sister is on bass, and I composed and performed Billy's theme that plays whenever the little guy shows up. My sister Amber, who's getting her degree in sound engineering right now, did an excellent job with the sound design on this one. I am genuinely so proud of the entire family for the score alone. Connor Kasnick's excellent cinematography really adds to the mood as well, which was such a focus for this film. A few years ago, I was reading about how John Carpenter shot Halloween with Panavision cameras to give his movie this expensive-looking feel, when really that classic 1978 flick was super low budget. I took a similar approach with this one by hiring Connor Kasnick, whose work I've been a fan of for a while now. The guy has some gorgeous looking reels on Instagram, and he also works for NASCAR sometimes. We had a meeting together and he was telling me that he had always wanted to shoot a horror film, which had me ecstatic. Not only do I love the guy's work, but we're also old high school buddies, so it was really cool to reconnect over this project. The film would not look half as good without his touch. My storyboards were shit.
Connor, you look like you're ready for the runway, dude. Feel like it.
I have to give some major props to Connor Caligaris as well, who wore a lot of hats on this production. Connor and I went through multiple different versions of this story while we were writing it, and he encouraged me to do something that was genuinely scary. I have a tendency to lean into the ridiculous. If you guys have seen Red Right Hand, you might know that. And a lot of the times he was thankfully my editor. Believe it or not though, he was the one to come up with the gigantic boil on my stomach. Trust me, I wish I could take credit for that. It is awesome. If you felt that the body horror was unnecessary in Chicken Man, by the way, that is something we want to expand upon in the feature, which is why it's even there in the first place. Connor made my life a lot easier on set too, serving as my first assistant director. Dude was killing it and even made sure one of the neighbors didn't call the cops on us. Hey, I would call the cops too if I saw a bloody man in a chicken mask running around smashing somebody in the head with a brick. Speaking of which, the practical effects were made by the absolutely wonderful Madison Kazmarski. My love, my flame. She taught me how to make stuff with liquid latex, which I was totally clueless on before. Her and my dad worked on a lot of the awesome practical effects you were able to see in this one. I gotta give a major shout out to Josh Petrino as well, who did the visual effects for Terrifier 3, for helping clean up a few shots here and fix some audio issues. Jess Dubois, who also worked on Terrifier 3, guided me through running a film set and was an invaluable production consultant. I am very thankful for their help on this one. After showing this to multiple friends and looking at some of the initial comments, it seems that the consensus is that it's too short. I think that was definitely the point because, again, the goal here is I would love to make a feature film out of this. I hope that people come away with it with a lot of questions about what the hell they just watched. There's a lot more to Zeke's character I would love to explore in a feature film. With every project I'm involved in, there are of course things I wish I did differently, like cover up that damn Scream tattoo on my shoulder, which is unbelievably distracting the entire time. I guess it's a nod to our Scream fan film though. I also wish we had spent more time building suspense in a few scenes, but with all low budget productions, we were strapped for time and money. That's why I spent nearly half a year on post-production. Again, I don't think Chicken Man is perfect by any means, but I am extremely proud of it. We had an excellent time on set making this, even during some long night shoots. A really funny story from night 2 is we lost the boom mic. It just got misplaced and we ended up finding it in the couch 6 months later. So we had to improvise a little bit, and basically what was supposed to be a little 4-hour, oh, let's just film the end of the movie shoot, turned into something that went from 9 o'clock at night to 8 the next morning. As the captain of this ship, I was there the entire time, scrubbing blood out of the grout of my parents' floor. Apologies to my mother and father for ruining their kitchen for that final scene. They're still finding blood in that refrigerator. I think what was really exciting about this project though is not only did I learn a lot about like just behind the scenes stuff, but I definitely learned more about like this character by shooting this short. Like I know there's a lot more things that I want to put into the feature that I didn't have before the production that I'm totally going to add to the feature if we're ever able to do it. That's kind of in all of your hands now though. If you like this short and you want to see more, show it to your buddies, share it on Instagram, do reviews of it too. And hey, if you hate it too, go ahead and shit on it in some kind of review video over on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you make content. I would greatly appreciate that. Also, you have my permission to just use the short in your review videos. I'm not gonna like claim it or anything. Go nuts. One last time here, I want to thank everybody that had a hand in this project. I am so grateful for all of you. I've always wanted my own little slasher villain, and it's because of all of you that I'm able to have my feathered fella.
What's wrong with Daddy? He got sick.
Yeah, sick of your ish, Ginger. Wolfman is the latest feature from Saw scribe Lee Winnell. It follows Blake, played by Christopher Abbott, and his family who are attacked by an unseen animal and, in a desperate escape, barricade themselves inside a farmhouse as the creature prowls the perimeter. As the night stretches on, however, Blake begins to behave strangely, transforming into something unrecognizable that soon jeopardizes his wife and daughter. Does this fresh take on the Universal classic monster movie deliver, or does it end up being a man-wolf abomination? Well, let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. I got to see Wolfman early during a little screening last night, thank you for having me, and I have a lot of spoiler-free thoughts to get into today. So let's start this review sandwich with a slice of something positive. The packed theater I saw this in, filled with reviewers and friends alike, seemed to be really digging every twist and turn. Trust me, there are a few of those. I was really feeding off of that energy, especially the guy next to me who jumped multiple times during some classic Blumhouse scare sequences that are abundant in this one. Don't get too excited, jump scare fans, you've seen most of them in the trailers. I will say though, there's one that really got me that I didn't see coming, because it wasn't in the trailers, damn it. Besides a seemingly positive reception, Wolfman is strangely inconsistent and has pretty poor pacing. Getting into the meat here, Wolfman was described as a new take on the original classic, inspired by body horror-centric films such as The Fly and The Thing. Cronenberg's reimagining of The Fly particularly relies on goopy practical effects, a fatal romance, and a tragic villain as its prime focal point. It's my favorite horror film of all time, especially for that last point there. Something similar is attempted here, and sometimes it works. There's a moment with the daughter Ginger about 3/4 of the way through that nearly brought me to tears. Besides a few heartfelt sequences, there's a lot of stuff in this film emotionally that just did not hit. Where the jump scares and action sequences aided the story of Winnell's last feature, The Invisible Man, creating tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, it really only detracts from the slow burner this should have been. There's a real lack of focus on building up Christopher Abbott's Blake as a tragic villain, even though the building blocks are there. I I needed less of the arbitrary haunted house style jump scares and more time spent on building up Christopher Abbott as this tragic Seth Brundle style character that they were clearly going for here. Going back to something I said earlier, there's a twist in the middle of this movie that works with what they set up in the shockingly subtle opening scene, but it ends up rerouting the emotional core of this film to focus on something else entirely. I definitely don't hate this twist because I think it works really well with a lot of the themes that are prevalent throughout the entire flick, something that is actually consistent about it, but it seems to take away from that The Fly-esque story that they're clearly going for here. In this moment, all I could think about though is that this very simple concept of a film was just trying to do way too much and resulted in a very uneven product. I do want to note, however, the rest of my theater did not expect this big twist. Alright, we gotta go back to the positives because I'm starting to sound like a negative Nancy here. I did not hate this film, I actually really liked it. The cinematography, for instance, is gorgeous. Winnell's use of the gimbal in both Upgrade and Invisible Man is now a staple of his style. The way a movie is shot can be a unique story all on its own, and Lee fully understands that. I love the location for this one too. It's supposed to be set in rural Oregon, but that's played by beautiful New Zealand here. I really want to go to New Zealand one day, but there are just way too many creepy crawlies running around, man. Besides the typical Blumhouse scare sequences you've certainly seen in the trailers at this point, there's a really subtle and eerie scene with a spider that is so unorthodox. The sound design in this sequence makes a spider crawling through a closet seem bigger than the Wolfman. I may be very alone in this boat, but that might be one of the scariest sequences in this entire film. It's a very unique way to push the plot forward too. And again, going back to cinematography for a second here, it's shot so well. Like, it feels like the spider is right in my damn face when I'm watching this thing. You're gonna want to smash that thing with the palm of your hand until there's just like blood, guts, and spider goo all over you. Speaking of goo though, the blood and gore certainly delivers in this movie, something that I guess I was a little shocked by. I really shouldn't be though, considering this comes from the guy that wrote Saw and Saw 2 and Saw 3. There's even a really cool reference to the first Saw that is so on the nose, but I loved every second of it. Usually I like to give hints about this kind of thing, but I don't want to spoil the last leg of the movie. I gotta be a negative Nancy one more time here, because besides this inconsistent emotional story, I also don't love the pacing. The first 20-ish minutes of this movie is exposition right until an explosive crash sends this movie into lightning fast pacing. Faster than how I used to talk in these damn videos. I can't believe of all people I'm complaining about this. Zombie from 1979, the movie that's currently on my shirt, is one of my favorite horror films ever, and this is such an in-your-face, super gory, over-the-top, campy zombie movie with a bunch of moments just like this. But I just don't think it works for something like the story they're trying to tell here. If this was a werewolf slasher style movie like Werewolves from last year, then I'd love this high-octane intensity from the get-go, but it doesn't work in the heartstring-pulling family drama this movie is simultaneously trying to be. It ends up really working against this one, unfortunately, at least for me, not building that same sort of high tension that 2020's Invisible Man saw, which I guess I really wanted from this movie. Wolfman uses this visual effect that I want to call were-vision that I think perfectly encapsulates everything I liked and didn't really like about the movie. As Blake changes into a werewolf, he stops understanding his family. There's a moment where his wife tells him something he's been waiting to hear the entire movie, but to him it sounds like gibberish. It's a really unique way to set up this punch that was set up a little earlier on in the film, and I love it. It's borderline a tearjerker sequence, but then later on in the film, they use this same were-vision thing from the character's perspective to set up another jump scare, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It's very weird. It's like they were reminding us, hey, this is a Blumhouse movie. Let me grab you by the throat. Blumhouse, baby. It's a really ambitious swing that works sometimes, but they keep using it over and over again with diminishing returns. It really dulls the shine of this film that had the tools to be spectacular had it picked a lane. Regardless of my critiques, Wolfman beats out most of the Blumhouse releases from the 2020s so far. I really can't be too hard on this one stacked up against something like Imaginary. Wolfman is a masterpiece compared to that film that literally took the same third act from Insidious 5 from the year before. Why, Chauncey? Why?
Chauncey says you're not allowed to play with us.
I've been hard on this Wolfman, who is probably like like 52% wolf, 48% man. But let me be a contrarian for a second and praise that design. The creature design for this film was heavily criticized after sort of debuting at Universal Studios, where some dude was pouncing around at guests in what looked like a cheap Spirit Halloween costume. I have so many questions for the Blumhouse marketing team, and this is all of them. I think the design is getting an unreasonable amount of hate because this is all a lot of people are familiar with. Some of you have been lucky enough to avoid the marketing for this film that spoiled nearly everything about it. But I think it works really well with the story at hand here, uneven or not. Kudos to the SFX and VFX teams here. I also think Christopher Abbott's performance as Blake alone is worth your time seeing this one in the theaters. He plays a complex character that carries some heavy themes with him throughout the entire film. I can't say that about most of the movies that have come out from this same studio recently.
Maybe my happy place can be our happy place?
I've been dogging on Blumhouse for some time now, but honestly, with their last couple of movies, it seems like this is a big turning point for the studio. I don't think Wolfman was like a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but it is definitely better than Night Swim, dude. I will take 100 more Wolfmans over a haunted pool movie that somehow is about baseball. What? I still recommend seeing Wolfman in the theaters this weekend, warts and all. Not all of it works, but some of it really does. Those little moments of magic show me that even in one of his weakest features, Leigh Whannell can still prove he's a master of horror. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. I think the initial attraction to Presence from all of the marketing that this film has done so far is the idea of flipping the tired haunted house formula on its head. If you've seen a horror movie in the last 20 years or so, you have definitely gone through this journey before. A new family moves into a house with a spirit, chaos and or jump scares happen a bunch, the family hires an exorcist, and the spirit is vanquished. We have seen it done plenty of times, not just in the Conjuring universe. Presence presents itself as a new take on the subgenre by putting you in the driver's seat of the entity itself. This thankfully doesn't end up being a gimmick, rather a vessel to push a familiar mystery in a really fresh way. For instance, one of the many mysteries of this film is the simple question of who are we actually following here? What is this entity? A who? A what? A demon? A person in the film? Well, I don't know at the start of the movie. With that in mind, let's get into our stellar cast here. Julia Fox from Uncut Gems shows up for like a scene, which is really cool, but I wouldn't call her a main character. The Payne family, however, is the focal point of the film, with Chris Sullivan playing Chris, perfectly cast with that one, wow. Eddie Mayday as Tyler, Kalina Lang as Chloe, and Lucy Liu as Rebecca. Lucy Liu is probably the most recognizable name from the cast, and she is excellent in movies such as Kill Bill Volume 1 and Payback. I personally know her as Watson on Elementary, a show I used to watch a lot in high school. Ya boy loves a good mystery, even if it's not horror adjacent. Besides hunting down clues on what or who this entity could be, there's also the mystery of how Chloe's friend mysteriously died. The coroner says Chloe's friend Nadia died of an overdose, although there is suspicion amongst the family over what actually happened. Before I go any further with that, I think that this movie could have stopped at the idea of taking the haunted house formula, flipping it on its head, showing you a lot of the tropes just from a different perspective, literally the other side, but this movie chooses to focus on something else for the majority of the film. Presence is a family drama that we just so happen to see from the perspective of a specter, which makes it very different from something like last year's In a Violent Nature. This film isn't too concerned with messing around with tropes and subverting them. This is more about telling this kind of story through a voyeuristic lens. We get to see these very vulnerable conversations with the characters that helps us understand them better and why certain choices are made in the end. I would have been very down for a film that does to the haunted house subgenre what In a Violent Nature did to the Friday the 13th films. But this kind of isn't that. Like, sure, you're gonna get some of those tropes. There's a medium that comes into the house at one point. We'll talk about that later. This movie, however, was much more focused on the familial story, which was really unexpected and intriguing. Another thing this film executes really well is making you love or hate some of the characters here. And I mean, like, strongly hate some of them, like Ryan, who is the biggest douche nozzle of all. West Mulholland, the actor who portrays Ryan here, looks like a mix of JJ Maybank from Outer Banks and Malachi from Children of the the corn. That's how you know Ryan is a little evil with a bit of a wild side. I wanted to punch this kid in the face so many times during the runtime of this very short movie, clocking in at only 85 minutes, especially when he was showing off his washboard abs. Ugh! West, great performance here, man. I hate this character. Rebecca and Tyler also made me want to rip some faces off, but that's getting into some spoiler territory. Again, that's something I want to save for later on. The last real big spoiler-free thing I want to get into here is that if you're expecting a terrifying jump scare-filled horror movie just from a different perspective, you might be disappointed by Presence. I found myself really engaged with the story at hand, so I didn't need things like cheap jump scares or monsters hanging out on the top of dressers to keep me interested, like a lot of the movies similar to this one. If you're hoping for this film to be a really sophisticated version of something like The Conjuring, you might not really end up getting that from this flick. In terms of terror, though, the final scene of this movie brought out a lot of emotions in me. Things that made me terrified, things that made me distraught, and all of this is only so effective because they lost some of the campier elements that movies like The Conjuring, Amityville Horror, Insidious, Paranormal Activity, all those flicks have. They lost all of that and gave you one big something crazy at the end of this flick that truly made me want to crawl out of my own damn skin. I was genuinely upset leaving the theater for this one. And then I got a flat tire on my way home and I had to put on a little donut in the middle of a snowstorm. I sacrificed my life in order to make this review today, ladies and gentlemen. All right, it's time to get into spoilers, so if you have not seen this flick yet, go on and check it out and then come on back. Thank you for not spoiling movies for yourself from some dork on the internet who likes to talk about horror. Please support films in the theater, especially this one, because it's good. I want to dissect the Payne family and why I think they work so well for a haunted house flick. If we look back at some of the big hitter haunted house movies from the past, like Insidious, Poltergeist, and Amityville Horror, we see a lot of families that start in a good place but deteriorate as more paranormal activity happens around them. The same goes for that series too.
Katie?
Here in Presence, the family is already divided before they even move into this new house. Sure, usually in a lot of these flicks, maybe the kids are upset that they got removed from the school they were familiar with. They don't get to see their friends anymore that they got to see every day. And while yes, that is a small factor with Chloe's character here, this movie is much more about the horrors of a parent picking a favorite child. Rebecca attaches herself to her son as they both lack empathy and are very career focused, while Chris and Chloe connect over their emotions and grief. It's a sad reality because I could totally see real people being stuck in a situation very similar to this. It makes the scenario instantly relatable and aids the emotional story, which is the focal point of this haunted house flick. A scene that examines this really well is when the entire family is hanging out in the living room as Tyler is telling his mother about a nasty prank him and his friends pulled on a girl at school. Chris occasionally chimes in with disappointment towards his son as his mother eggs him on, almost living vicariously through Tyler. Chloe sits on the other side of the couch holding a pillow as her mother turns her back to her. This is a perfect and unfortunate model for how this family operates. Chloe and Chris are often pushed away as Lucy Liu's Rebecca character typically makes a lot of the decisions, and Tyler is championed for whatever the hell he was doing just because he's successful at swimming. It's one of the many reasons why Chloe's mental state is not in a good place during this entire film, and also the same reason why Chris has to call a lawyer at one point early on in the flick to ask if he would get in trouble for illegal actions that his wife is maybe committing at work. There's a lack of trust on one side here and a level of neglect on the other that leads to a lot of the big decisions made in the third act here. Finally, talking about one of the big reveals of the film, douche nozzle Ryan, who has been dating Chloe for a majority of this flick, is secretly a Jeffrey Dahmer prodigy. He drugs people, in this case mostly women, by slipping it into their drink. He then tries to kill them by suffocation, which we almost see happen to Chloe. We learn in a very scary monologue from Ryan that he was the one to take out Nadia. He put some drugs in her drink, man. That's messed up. The spirit, watching all of this unfold, wakes up Tyler as he races upstairs. He intervenes by pushing Ryan out of Chloe's window, with both of them falling to their deaths. At this point in the film, it is very easy to think that the spirit has been Chloe's friend this entire time. I mean, nearly every sign points right to it. The spirit helps organize Chloe's books for her, it trashes Tyler's room after he told that god-awful story, and it even saved Chloe's life in the end. This movie, however, is full of twists and turns as it sets up its big reveal at the end here so well. A medium character is invited to the house and locks eyes with the spirit multiple times during the visit. She knows that some sort of presence is there, which I think Chloe actually says almost verbatim, like one point earlier on.
Here I come.
The medium explains that the spirit is anachronistic, which means it could be from a different time. In turn, meaning that this character could still be alive during the events of the film. She even comes back later to tell Chris that something is going to happen with a closed window in the house. The big reveal comes right at the end during a denouement where Lucy Liu is struggling to leave the house after the family gets ready to move again. She walks into the living room one last time to see Tyler in the mirror behind her. The spirit has been her son this entire time. My eyes widened, I had goosebumps all over my entire body, and I was sick to my stomach with sadness. This character that I hated the entire movie was silently going through a redemptive arc post-mortem. And then on top of that, to feel so bad for Lucy Liu's character, who again is maybe a criminal, maybe an awful mother, not a character that I really connected with through this entire flick, and yet here I am still finding myself so upset for her. It's heart-wrenching, harrowing, a little scary at times too, and it makes for a very unique flavor from this film. Overall, I think Presence is an excellent addition to 2025 horror, and I think it's going to be one we're still talking about at the end of the year.
Are you breaking up with me?
I could never, Jack. You're too devilishly handsome, charming, gorgeous, and silly. God damn. Companion is a new film that's been getting some rave reviews, and I couldn't help but go into it with some high expectations, especially after a very interesting marketing campaign that may have given away a few of the movie's twists. Is Companion a perfect date night horror movie, or does this one need to power down? Well, let's get into it. Companion comes from writer-director Drew Hancock, who also penned the screenplay for the 2012 hit movie Fred 3, Camp Fred. I could not do that in one take. That was like the 7th take of that dude. You know, those first 2 Fred movies were okay, I guess, but they really figured it out in part 3. You might not care about that detail at all, but it's very important to me. It's also being billed as coming from the same folks that brought us the modern horror classic Barbarian, Zach Cregger and Roy Lee, serving as producers here. Roy Lee is a pretty legendary modern horror producer, man. My man's here had a hand in The Strangers, the Andy Muschietti It film, and last year's Strange Darling. Across the board hits here, including Barbarian. The writer-director of that 2022 film, though, Zach Cregger, also produces this one, and oh boy, I can't wait for his follow-up feature, Weapons, coming out next year. I am sad that Pedro Pascal will no longer be in the film, however. It is going to suffer from a lack of Pedro. Companion certainly has a similar feel to Barbarian, especially with its humor and twists. There's that same disjunct feeling twisty plot here too, but it's definitely not as effective as finding a dying serial killer in the basement of your Airbnb. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get into spoilers for Companion, so if you have not seen this one, get the heck out and then come on back. Companion follows a couple, Josh and Iris, who go out to a gorgeous cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. It's revealed that Iris is a companion robot that Josh bought because he's a lonely little incel. If you didn't get that spoiled from the full trailer, I truly envy you. Another thing spoiled in the trailer was that Josh jailbroke his sex bot here, so it would feel aggression and kill Rupert Friend's character, so Josh and Kat could take all of his money. Not to sound like a broken record, but the things that work best about Companion are absolutely the humor and the twists. Every character is really thought out and has at least one laugh or a powerful moment that takes the story down a new direction. It reminds me a lot of Fred 3 in that sense. Seriously though, a major standout element from this film is Eli and Patrick's relationship. In the only twist that actually shocked me because the marketing team decided to give me literally everything about this film before we got into it, it's revealed that Patrick is also a robot. Do I sound salty towards the marketing team? Maybe, a little bit. Not the filmmakers' fault, they made an excellent movie here, but what the fuck? That final trailer, man, jeez. My favorite gag in this movie revolves around Patrick's character, however, because his fabricated meet cute is one where he accidentally stepped on Eli's tail. He was wearing a dinosaur costume at this like costume party or whatever, and they fell in love from there. They danced the night away. It's ridiculous. They cut back to this fabricated story though after Eli dies and Josh takes over as his main user. It shows you the same story again but with Jack Quaid, and it is easily one of the funniest things in this entire film. Almost as funny as that hard cut to Jack Quaid literally coming. Like you are in his face when he's nutting. It's upsetting. Comedy gold right here, baby. Getting back to this couple though, amidst a search for the escaped Iris, Patrick confesses to Eli that he knows he's a robot but he doesn't care. He still loves him and wants to make this work. I feel like it's this conversation between Eli and Patrick, and of course the focal point of this film, Iris's arc, that gives this movie a lot of weight. It could have just been a really silly robot adventure, but it's much more than that. You can simply replace the word robot there with bottom and it makes the film a lot more relatable. The film has a lot to say about the power dynamic in a relationship that is conveyed through robots. In Patrick and Eli's relationship, they found a way to make it work where they're both happy, but with Iris and Josh, one of them is clearly taking advantage of the other. It's a great use of duality that definitely makes this one stand apart from other films that have already tried the same concept. It also makes Eli's death genuinely sad. Like, this is a really silly movie, and I was upset when that happened. Now listen, I love the quirky humor and the in-your-face commentary, but we have to talk about how Alex Garland already made this movie 10 years ago. Companion is different enough in tone for me not to call this a ripoff of Alex Garland's Ex Machina, but it is right up to the line there, man. Both films carry similar themes, but admittedly have different enough approaches for them to be separate in my mind. Companion is really aggressive, triumphant, and over the top, where Ex Machina is much more subtle and restrained. I think the best way to compare these two flicks is their very similar endings. It's basically the same thing, but again, the approach is so different. Companion ends with Iris having a triumphant victory over Josh with the most insane kill of the flick. She uses that automatic wine opener right to his dome. Oh my god, that's awesome. It does remind me a lot of the ending to Scream 5 though. She drives off into the sunset afterwards and basically pretends to be a human, not before waving her little metallic hand at this couple driving by though. Ex Machina, however, shows Ava killing Nathan with the world's slowest and coldest stab I've ever seen on film and trapping Caleb inside of the mansion where he likely starves to death off screen. The film ends with Ava putting on fake skin and entering the world pretending to be a human being. Now, while both endings certainly have their merits, I think I just prefer Ex Machina's ending for how cold and sullen it is. That is one of the most uniquely upsetting endings to a horror flick I have ever seen in my life. Oh my god, talk about fate's worse than death, man. Jeez. Companion, like I said, reminds me a lot of how most modern horror flicks end with some sort of triumphant victory over the bad guy. Not that that's a bad thing, I mean it certainly works here, but I'm just a sucker for a good tragedy. One thing is for sure though, it's impossible to deny the similarities between these two flicks. That's not supposed to be a dig at Companion, however. There are references across the board to a bunch of other robotic horror flicks like Terminator 2. I again want to praise the rest of the cast, especially Jack Quaid, Sophie Thatcher, and Lucas Gage, who are leaving it all out on the field with this one. These three characters keep the themes prevalent in every scene, joke, and character decision, which makes this horror comedy focused and thought out. The performances reflect that in the best way too. Jack Quaid reminds me of Tom Hanks in the sense that he can really play any character they throw at him. He's an excellent hero, but his charming demeanor and boyish looks can be deceptive too. He plays a villain just as well as Huey on The Boys, man. Sophie Thatcher has been in hit after hit recently with Heretic from this past November, ending up on many folks' favorite horror films of 2024 lists. I could definitely see the same thing happening for Companion, depending on how the rest of the year goes. There's some big releases that I don't think are going to be very good, but we'll see. And the underdog here, Lucas Gage, easily has one of the craziest roles in Smile 2 from last year too. His drug dealer character is basically the reason why all of that crazy shit happened to Sky Riley. Lucas Gage especially kills it in Companion, however. I think I like his role here even more than in Smile 2. He's channeling Robert Patrick's T-1000 in the back half of this one, which I think he's named after, right? That has to be a reference to Terminator 2. He is literally in a cop outfit at one point. Come on now. I have my criticisms about the concept overall, but man, Companion was an absolute blast. I really enjoyed this one, and I hope it's a reflection of what's to come. In the Fred movie series, of course. I'm still waiting on Fred 4 all aboard the USS Frenterprise.
Hey, you good?
I got to see Heart Eyes early, and before this new slasher drops on February 7th, which is next Friday, let's talk a little bit about this one spoiler-free. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. So what is Heart Eyes, you might be asking? Well, I got a plot description with your name on it, baby. Heart Eyes is about a masked maniac with glowing red heart eyes, who returns every Valentine's Day to terrorize unsuspecting couples. The tagline, "Stay single, stay alive," is very relevant with this one. Heart Eyes is essentially your typical murder mystery film, but with the Valentine's theme to it. You have definitely seen a movie like this, especially from the writers here, Michael Kennedy and Christopher Landon. They've written movies such as Happy Death Day, Freaky, It's a Wonderful Knife, and the upcoming Drop, which also looks like it's going to be a murder mystery slasher. But getting into the positives with this one, the cast is excellent. I absolutely loved pretty much everybody in the cast list here. They're all very funny, really lean into the whole rom-com vibe of this one, that this movie almost feels like a parody of of. Mason Gooding and Jordana Brewster are without a doubt my favorite parts of this movie. They were excellent. Also, if you're a Fast and Furious mega fan like me, there is a reference to that franchise in here. You can't have Dom Toretto's sister in another movie and not make a reference to that. Come on now. We won, gearheads. We won. This film really leans into its concept, the idea of what if you have this typical rom-com, these two characters who are falling in love with each other, but a slasher villain is trying to cut them up into little tiny pieces. One of the biggest things I loved about this film is it commits to the bit, it never loses focus on that. Also, while we're on the topic of cast and crew, there is one of the funniest director's cameos in this movie that I have ever seen. This film was directed by Josh Rubin, who has done movies like Scare Me and Werewolves Within before, and he gets to pop into this movie for literally one scene, and it is so funny. Look out for it. It's right up there with Peter Jackson eating the carrot in Fellowship of the Ring. Some more positives with this film is I feel like our slasher villain here, Heart Eyes, is badass. The opening scene of this movie establishes this guy as a real threat. The opening scene of this film is super bloody and tremendously over the top, making it easily my favorite moment from the entire film. And throughout the entire movie, there are great kills. I think my favorite is even right at the end, which I can't talk about because that would be a spoiler. It's not one of those kills like from Terrifier or In a Violent Nature where you've just never seen something like that before. It's something that's already been done, but the way it's done is very specific and really interesting to me. It's the one kill that was still bouncing around my brain when I was leaving the theater. I really enjoyed that one. Sounds like I'm sick in the head, doesn't it? But unfortunately, I did find some cons with this film, some things I just wasn't crazy about. The big problem with the mystery in Heart Eyes is that the film tries to set up another character as a red herring earlier on, but it's done so poorly that it's obviously this other person. The reason I say it's done poorly is that you, the audience, know this person is not the killer because of some other stuff that ends up happening. Had we not been given that information, there would still be that red herring element to this story that is killed almost immediately once it starts. I think this movie would have been a lot stronger had it not been a Scream-inspired murder mystery style film. There really is a lot going for this killer here, man. I mean, the design is awesome. I love the way Heart Eyes looks. His light up heart eyes are really cool. And I think most people after that opening scene are going to be sold on this killer. I could totally see a future for this guy, but unfortunately, the mystery element of this one is just severely undercooked. While I absolutely love Michael Kennedy and Christopher Landon's scripts, I will continue to see any movie they make, including the upcoming Drop coming out in just like 2 months here. The biggest con I typically have to their scripts is that they just get a little too close to the Scream playbook. Not every slasher has to be exactly Scream. It can be inspired by Scream, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's so many moments of this film where I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, that's the thing that they did in Scream. That's the other thing that they did in Scream. These guys have some excellent writing chops. I've been a huge fan of Christopher Landon ever since his Paranormal Activity days, but this one unfortunately just utilizes too many of the same shocks, twists, and turns from the original Scream film. Overall though, I had a very good time with Heart Eyes, and I think if you liked the other slasher films that have come from Spyglass Media recently, like Thanksgiving and the other 2 Scream movies that they've made, I think you're gonna like this one. Hang on a minute, what movie are we covering today again?
The Monkey Chain!
No, that's not it.
The Monkey's Fist!
No, not that one either.
The Monkey!
Hey, that's the right one. Is The Monkey the brutal splatterfest we all were promised, or does it have something else to offer? Well, let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. The Monkey is a new adaptation of the Stephen King short story found in one of his most famous collections, Skeleton Crew. Let me just go grab it. This one right here. The Monkey, as well as The Mist, The Jaunt, and The Raft can all be found in this bad boy. It's an excellent read, especially right before you see this new movie. The plot description of the film reads, when twin brothers find a mysterious wind-up monkey, a series of outrageous deaths tears the family apart. 25 years later, the monkey begins a new killing spree, forcing the estranged siblings to confront the cursed toy. The short story is way more grounded than the movie I just saw last night, and oh my god, that is my first very big positive about the Oz Perkins flick. Perkins took this pretty typical Poe-inspired cursed object story and made it into something that feels larger than life. Had you just made an adaptation that was a one-to-one with this short story, where the climax is nothing more than a little rowboat capsizing, I just don't think that would have been as exciting as what we actually got. We'll compare and contrast the third act of the short story as well as the movie in just a moment here though. Everything about this movie is outrageous, from the plot to the dialogue, and of course, course, the kills. They're set up in a very similar way to that of a Final Destination film. They're elaborate mousetrap-feeling deaths where the tension is built by seeing it all slowly unfold. Unfortunately, though, this film does share a common issue I have with most of the Final Destination movies, that being a lot of the kills are done digitally without some sort of practical element. Just like the Terrifier series, The Monkey has marketed itself by teasing all of the over-the-top kills. When most of them don't even have a practical element, that just seems like something that should have been prioritized before cameras were even rolling. In The Monkey's defense, there are some kills you simply could not have done in camera. There's one involving bees, for instance, that I loved. But then there's a decapitation scene that kind of made me roll my eyes. Unfortunately, this film does end up being hit or miss with a lot of the kills, but there are many standouts. I thought that was going to be the strongest element of this movie, but surprisingly, it's the character work. I was pretty blown away by this film, mostly being about a struggling relationship between father and son. It's done really well, and I think that Theo James and Colin O'Brien absolutely steal the show here. I also liked that this movie is a lot more in your face about some of the personal themes from the director himself. It's similar to Longlegs in that sense, but I would say it's even more in your face than that film. Perkins lost both of his parents in very gruesome ways, but his mother unfortunately passed on one of the airplanes that crashed during the 9/11 attacks. There is definitely a meditation on that here in this flick. In a more general sense, though, the monkey is just a symbol for death. I would go so far as to say that the monkey itself isn't even supernatural, it's just a reminder of the inevitable. Everybody dies, and that's fucked up. Not to get too philosophical here, but I've always thought that death gives life meaning. You have this finite amount of time to do something while you're under the sun. Life has always been about answering that question in your own unique way, and I think The Monkey hits on that in a cartoonishly morbid way. It has all the fun and campiness of a great horror B-movie, but it's also very thoughtful. I think it was Jordan Peele who said that he likes to make thoughtful popcorn movies. This is absolutely that. Alright, I want to get into some spoilery territory, so if you have not seen The Monkey yet, go check it out and then come on back. Spoilers ahead, you have been warned. To understand where the movie is coming from in maybe greater detail, I think we have to look at the short story again. Stephen King's short story bounces back and forth between Hal Shelbourne's childhood and his adult life, essentially hitting on the same themes of death but without the humor. The story is surprisingly straightforward, and I think Oz adds so much to this one with a heavy pour of the outrageous. One similarity between the short story and the film itself, though, is how in-your-face its message is. It's very clear that this monkey means death, so that addition of humor really works here, I think, just to elevate that concept. I like when horror comedy has a point in making it silly, too, and the monkey absolutely justifies itself in that dimension. A really great example of this is literally seeing death on a pale horse right at the end of this movie. Right out of the Book of Revelation, Hal and Petey literally witness death on a white horse named Pestilence walking down the street. It almost kind of feels like the monkey revealing who it really is. I don't know, maybe that's a stretch, but it is a really interesting visual to cap this one off. Had this movie not had that outrageous tone, this would be totally out of place. Digging a little deeper into what I was talking about earlier, about how Oz Perkins is definitely doing a little meditation on his own grief and trauma, with his parents both dying in pretty awful ways, this film seems to focus especially on his mother. During a phone conversation between Hal and Bill, the characters literally say the numbers in sequence 9 and 11, and then the climax of this movie sees a plane go down after the monkey bangs its drum like 100 times. On top of the director putting a lot of his own character into this one, I loved what he did with the climax, which made it so much better than the short story. Apologies to Mr. King, but I think Oz Perkins made your story a little better here. Rowan Campbell, everyone's new favorite Halloween slasher, plays the stereotypical Stephen King troubled teenager villain here named Ricky. He reminds me a lot of Henry Bowers from It, if you need an example. Ricky really wants that monkey because for some reason it reminds him of his father. Did your father perhaps lead a resistance group against the humans that experimented on him? In that case, your father is dead. He died in the third movie. Oops, spoilers. Ricky is the catalyst for a very fresh climax. That sounds gross. Ricky, that just sounds, I don't even want to repeat that. That's just funny. All right, if you made it this far into the video, you already know how this movie wraps up, but let's talk a little bit about the short story that you might not know that much about. At the end of the short story, Hal and Petey decide to toss the monkey into Crystal Lake, right next to Jason, presumably, in a duffel bag filled with rocks. Petey stays ashore while Hal goes out to the deepest part of the lake. He tosses it over as he hears the cymbals banging again and the boat starts to fall apart. Hal barely makes it back to shore and reunites with Petey. There is a really funny bit at the end, however, where these headlines in the city read, "All these fish are floating up all of a sudden dead in this lake. What's going on?" The climax climax of the short story is cathartic, but I think the biggest reason why I like it way better here in the movie is that it's much more about acceptance rather than triumph. In the movie itself, after Bill is killed by his mother's bowling ball, which has to be like the most Final Destination death of this whole thing, Hal and Petey drive off through the carnage with the monkey in the back seat. They've accepted that they're the owners of the monkey. This is something that's just a part of their lives. That works so much better with what the message of this whole thing is. That's thematically very powerful, because it doesn't matter what we do in this life, we're all going to die. I also love that this ending represents that there's no more lies between father and son anymore. They're able to rebuild their relationship on truth. I have my criticisms towards Oz Perkins flicks, but the monkey is easily the best one in my opinion. A lot of this works for me, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Speaking of that, we got a teaser trailer for his next movie that comes out later this year on October 3rd called Keeper, right at the end of this flick. If you missed it, it plays after the credits. Go back and see the monkey again if you didn't see this, because it's kind of crazy. Now, we don't know much about the actual plot itself yet, but from this teaser trailer, what I've gathered is it's a bunch of different shots of these like women on dates, I think. They're like doing leisurely activities and like just a couple of shots here, and then all of a sudden they're like kidnapped and covered in blood. These characters though are always looking right at the camera, like it's maybe a character perhaps. My guess is that whoever this character is that all these women are looking at is maybe some sort of assailant kidnapping them and doing something just truly awful. The only thing we actually do know about Keeper besides its title is that it's going to be a darker trip than what we've gotten from Oz Perkins in his most recent flicks. Because let's be honest, both Longlegs and the monkey are pretty silly. This seems to be a film with a much more serious tone, and I'm really excited to get into it. There was also a brand new teaser trailer for another neon horror flick called Together. It stars Alison Brie and Dave Franco, and wow, it looks good. The plot description for this one reads, after moving to the countryside, a supernatural encounter starts to transform a couple's love, their lives, and their flesh. In the trailer itself, there's a tease at the couple literally morphing together into one being. Like, I'm sure there's gonna be some sort of brutal practical effect when we actually get into the film itself, but the only tease we got at specifically that in this new trailer was this really close-up shot of both of their eyes like nearly touching, and it almost looks like their eyelashes are like morphing together. I don't know what this movie is about to entail, but it is getting rave reviews out of Sundance from just this past January, and I am so excited for it. Supernatural body horror is like my absolute favorite genre, so I think I know I'm going to like this one. It also seems like it's some kind of strange and bizarre take on codependency based on some of the reviews that were in that trailer as well. I'll be seated day one, man. So you might have noticed that I'm wearing a pretty cool beanie in this video. You can get merch for my short film Chicken Man right now at the Killjoy Jake store. There's a beanie, there's a shirt, there's a bunch of cool stuff over there. And maybe you like Scream a little more than Chicken Man, understandably so. There's a bunch of Wes Carpenter t-shirts out there as well with a brand new fresh design. It's got Ghostface on the sleeve and everything. It's fucking sick.
So, how's the lady garden?
Time to trim the downstairs verge and talk all about Opus, the brand new horror offering from A24. Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Opus follows Ariel Ecton, played by Ayo Edebiri, who travels to the remote compound of a legendary pop star, Alfred Moretti, played by John Malkovich, who mysteriously disappeared 30 years ago. Surrounded by a cult of sycophants and intoxicated journalists, she soon finds herself in the middle of his twisted plan. Just like many A24 horror outings, Opus is filled with a ton of metaphors and a lot of weird, bizarre happenings that all come to a single conclusion. Just like Moretti's music, I guess, the attention to detail here in Mark Anthony Green's directorial debut is spectacular. This is something we'll dive further into as we get deeper into this review, but just stay patient for now, my friends. Easily the biggest draw to Opus is the central performances from your main two characters. It's great to see Ayo Edebiri in a horror movie. I've really only seen her in comedies and dramas before in the past, and I hate to sound pretentious like Alfred Moretti here, but I've been a fan of Edebiri's ever since I randomly caught her stand-up special Up Next on Comedy Central one day. She's of course a standout on The Bear, which might be my favorite show on television right now, and I can't believe I still haven't seen Bottoms. Ayo and Rachel Sennett in the same movie? I need it! Edebiri kills it as a leading lady here, and I really hope she comes back to the genre sometime soon. And I think this goes without saying, but John Malkovich eats up every scene that he is in this one, even if some of the ebb and flow of this movie isn't all that. Speaking of which, I think this is one of those A24 vehicles that you just simply have to be patient with, because this flick is absolutely not about the journey, much more so about the destination. A lot of this movie ends up feeling like a lesser version of a way more popular flick in A24's catalog, except it does get to explore a very different theme. When we got about like 90% of the way through this movie, I was ready to write this one off as like, whatever, wasn't really for me, not very great. But then the ending happened, and honestly, it gives a whole new meaning to the entire thing. So for me at least, this movie ends up being a mixed bag rather than just a total redundancy. It makes up for a lot of the very easy to draw comparisons between this movie and another cult horror flick that came out in 2019 from the same company. Anyways, I think it's time to talk about spoilers for this one, so if you have not seen Opus yet, go check it out and then come on back. Spoilers ahead, you have been warned. The word opus is defined as an artist's work, usually on a larger scale. I think in this movie's case, it may even be short for magnum opus, which is of course an artist's greatest work. Alfred Moretti is constantly referring to his new album that way, pretentiously titled Caesar's Request. It's a title that makes me want to literally throw up, especially when he explains why it's called that. Even in the eyes of the peasants, royalty is still considered as such. Like, shut up, dude. I've never wanted to punch John Malkovich more in my entire life. This is all kind of brilliant though, because even though as this movie progresses, you gradually start to hate this guy more and more, he gets everything he wanted by the time this thing wraps up. It's crushing to Ariel's character, who only realizes far too late that she's fallen into his trap and has no intentions of undoing her unmitigated success. Even though she has so much resentment for this guy as this movie continues to go on, she kinda ends up being his biggest fan. At least that's what her career depends on, isn't it? See, I told you we were getting right into spoilers, man. I gave you a warning, come on now. Breaking down Moretti's scheme, however, this one starts to unfold as soon as this movie opens up. I feel like this movie was targeting me a bit when Ariel starts to open up, and she talks about how she wants to be this great journalist who can have the freedom to write about all the weird things she's interested in. Her friend here, who is definitely trying to smash, gives her some pretty good advice, admittedly, saying that she has to stop being so in the middle, take a hard stance on something. And she definitely does that by the time we get to the end of this one. Ugh, man, this is so good. Alfred Moretti announces he has a brand new album and he's gonna have some people come on by his compound and listen to the new single. He invites Ariel Ecton, this up-and-coming wide-eyed green reporter who wants to break some sort of big story. It's a shock to all of her co-workers and even to herself. You realize as this story marches on, however, that everyone else who was invited is there for cannon fodder. Alfred Moretti just wanted to get revenge on a lot of these folks and kill them, which is why he pretty much lets Ariel escape. After a Heaven's Gate-style drinking ceremony, Ariel escapes, proving to be Moretti's linchpin. The police show up to the compound, and there's Moretti playing his piano, who completely surrenders, doesn't try to escape or anything, and all of his levelist cult members are gone, out of sight, completely disappeared. His downfall becomes the greatest news story in pop culture, and his album is selling like hotcakes. 2 years pass by, and the hungry young journalist here writes a book about everything that happened on the compound, and again, that album is selling like crazy, dude. Ariel is now forced to spend the greatest part of her career covering this dude's downfall, which is exactly what he wanted. You think it's totally over for the guy when Ariel visits him in prison, but he's sitting there with an orchid, which flowers have so much meaning in this movie, which I think is really interesting. Orchids tend to resemble like luxury or power, and he has all of the power in this situation, even sitting in a prison cell. He has put Ariel in a position where she has to write about him for her career to succeed. She is trapped in that situation because of her own self-interests. I also think that Moretti's character just in general represents all the things that us artists will get in our heads about when it comes to creating something great. We feel like we have to do this massive self-sacrifice in order to achieve greatness, but the truth is there is just a bout of luck to it, which does get explored in this movie, which I want to talk about in a second. But I do have some overall criticisms of this movie, because even though the themes of suffering for your art are so prevalent and so focused, really sharp, really well done, there's some elements to just the journey overall that I guess I just wasn't crazy about. There are so many moments in Opus that remind me a lot of Midsummer, a admittedly much more popular A24 horror flick that's way more easily recognizable. I think if you try to do any sort of cult horror at this point that revolves around daytime and flowers, it's going to be way too similar to Midsommar. It's impossible not to draw comparisons between that movie and this one. It goes deeper than just that though, because this cult literally has a temple on their compound. They go there to open up a bunch of oysters and look for pearls, which I think yet again is another suffer for your art metaphor. You gotta go through a lot of oysters to get some pearls. We even see a character literally suffer, like literal pain, when he accidentally stabs the knife he's using to crack open these oysters right into his hand, like right here, and that has to be the most effective bout of horror in this entire movie. There are plenty of other Midsommar comparisons I could make with this one, if it's the ebb and flow of this movie where you're learning more about this cult and their hypocrisies, or the fact that one of the journalists gets their head chopped off and festooned with flowers up in the Moretti Museum. I mean, there's so many things that are just like other scenes in Midsommar. We could talk about that all day. But I think I want to close out this review by talking about a lot of the horror elements here, where there's so many good ideas, but I don't feel like anything actually really affected me in this film. Another character who gets invited to the compound alongside Ayo Edebiri's character, what is her name again? Ariel, like the mermaid. She's this super attractive influencer named Emily, who I guess got some not so great looking paparazzi shots of Moretti at one point. I don't know, that's really funny to me that he like still holds a grudge about pictures. Like, are you kidding me? She gets this really over the top death that we get to see on screen, but a lot of it just looks really digital to me, and just, it's one of those things where in concept on paper, this was a sick idea. Like all of her like wet organs expand in her body. Like we actually see her eyeball pop into Moretti's face at one point, which like, that's so cool, but we don't really see any blood. It's just a little bit of eyeball juice. I don't know. I feel like we could have seen some more Viscara there. This is something I feel like people may disagree with, but I feel like the message is so in your face in this movie. I wish a lot of the horror resembled that as well in this flick. Again, lots of great ideas. There's another character, Juliette Lewis's character, who's wearing a wig, and she's like, oh, it's too tight on my head, I hate this. And then she's dragged by her scalp at one point where we actually get to see a little bit rip off. It's like, it's pretty disgusting. I loved it, but there should be more elements similar to that, which again, another thing that I just feel like Midsommar has this movie beat on. I think this does end up being a smaller criticism than I'm making it out to be though, because overall Opus has done really well. I think there's some excellent penmanship here that has me impressed and has me excited to see whatever Mark Anthony Green does next. But overall, I just wish that it was a tad more tough to watch, I guess, because it's insufferable. I mean, oh my god, hanging out with John Malkovich's character here, I want to punch him in the face, like I said earlier, but I wish it was a little harder to watch, a little grosser. We could have delved deeper into that department to match the intensity of the themes prevalent here. I still really enjoyed Opus. I'd still call it a pretty big surprise. I wouldn't call it best of the year or anything like that, but definitely a worthy watch. Very thought-provoking, but a tad underwhelming with the actual horror elements.
It is a small world after all.
Screamboat is the new flick from Mean One director Stephen Lamorte, Art the Clown actor David Howard Thornton, and Fuzz on the Lens, one of the many production companies behind the Terrifier flicks. Is this the best public domain slasher yet, or is it a little too silly for those cute, adorable little shorts that guy's wearing? Oh my god! Well, let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and I can't whistle, otherwise I would have done something probably a little funny here at the beginning of this video relating to today's topic. Screamboat first set sail after Steamboat Willie, the original Mickey Mouse cartoon, went into the public domain at the top of 2024. Since then, many cash grab feeling slasher movies have been made based on the fallen IP. There's The Mousetrap, Mouse of Horrors, I Heart Willie, Mickey vs. Winnie, Mouseboat Massacre, and I guess they're even making a friggin' sequel to The Mousetrap for some reason. While I haven't seen all of those flicks, I can confidently say that Screamboat is without a doubt the cream of the crop when it comes to Steamboat Willie horror. There is a lot to love here, especially for Terrifier fans. Kaylee Hyman from the last two Terrifier flicks buys into her caricature of a role, making for a super goofy standout performance. David Howard Thornton cranks up his cartoonish slasher levels to 11, and principal photography mostly took place on Pete Davidson and Colin Jost's boat. I guess Pete Davidson is a huge Terrifier fan, and Art the Clown even made a cameo on his show Bupkiss. Speaking of DHT, he pretty much carries this steamy vehicle in his larger-than-life, yet shorter-than-usual role. What I really like about David's performances is that they consistently offer up something new with each new role he takes on. Willie and Art the Clown, for instance, are two totally separate characters, yet they both have that cartoonish energy you might love about the actor. He's obviously playing to his strengths here, but Willie definitely has a different personality than Art the Clown. I think he's even more mischievous. He also has a clear motive that's defined by the end of this flick, something we still don't have for Art the Clown after 3 Terrifier movies. And man, for the first 45 minutes of Screamboat, it is hilarious that this little guy is just a foot tall. This movie unfortunately runs for an hour and 42 minutes, however, which is like 20 minutes way too long. You really do start to feel the drag for this one around the midpoint, but I will say I think Screamboat offers up a lot more than the typical public domain slasher film that usually just delivers on some ridiculous kills and deflowering an iconic character. Screamboat probably has the sharpest commentary of any of the public domain horror flicks I've seen. Sure, Jagged Edge Productions has a hint of that in their snowballing Poonaverse, but Screamboat is much more thorough. There's a scene where Jarlath Conroy's character starts explaining Steamboat Willie's backstory. At least the perverted version that is probably only canon to this film and this film alone. Willie was adopted by the captain, aptly named Walter, who drowns one day, leaving Willie alone on the boat. This is why he's so pissed off and wants to kill everybody, I guess, even though that happened many years ago. Why is this massacre happening now? The world may never know. I loved the animated cutaway to tell his backstory, but the best thing about this scene is that our Harbinger character here says, kind of verbatim, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but he says something along the lines of, everything on this boat is recycled to make more money. This, alongside Steamboat Willie literally changing the prices to things on the boat to make them way higher, seems like it is absolutely taking aim at the Disney Corporation. We're talking about a company that profits off of really shitty live-action remakes of their classics from the past. And we also can't forget that Disney is an evil corporation who absolutely hates artists and writers. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. There's also some jabs at some popular Disney flicks along the way too, which I thought was fun. Kaylee Hyman's character, for instance, resembles Cinderella, and she even loses a shoe before her untimely death in this flick. Is that a spoiler? Do you guys even really care? I don't know. And all of her friends resemble the Disney princesses, of course.
Let's get this jungle cruise going!
There's also a pun about the movie Frozen, which got a little giggle out of me, I have to admit. Even though Screamboat is a little more sophisticated than its constituents, I think the word sophisticated is maybe a little too kind to this movie, let's be honest. It is still way too long, and the joke dies out very quickly. The kills really aren't much to write home about here, which I think is really a shame. Even in Stream, a movie that doesn't really have anything to do with Terrifier, it's just made by Fuzz on the Lens, directed by Michael Levy, it's a film that's still prospered with some really over-the-top and memorable deaths. The characters aren't much to write home about either. I mean, it's typical slasher protagonists, but set it on a boat. Still better than Jason Takes Manhattan, though. This is still towards the top of the list when it comes to public domain horror, though, and if you just want to laugh at a goofy horror comedy, definitely see this one in theaters. And not to play the sympathy card too much here, but it is a low-budget indie horror flick. Go support this one in theaters over, like, maybe the new Marvel movie. You know? It's way cooler to support something like this than a fucking Monopoly.
Oh, wow. Did you mean to dress like a candy cane?
Violet is doing her best, Jen. Drop is the brand new horror movie from Happy Death Day director Christopher Landon. Does this Hitchcockian thriller deliver the suspense, or does it drop the ball? Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and I'm way too proud of that dumb pun I just said in the intro. Drop follows Violet, a widowed mother leaving for a date with Hunky Henry. That's not actually his name in the movie, but you're gonna look at that guy and tell me he ain't a hunk of meat? Once she gets to this sick rooftop restaurant serving as our principal setting for this thriller, she is terrorized by a series of anonymous messages to her phone. The airdropper instructs her to tell nobody and follow increasingly malicious instructions, or her younger sister Jen and her son Toby will be killed, culminating with her being told to kill her date. I know Christopher Landon didn't write this movie, but you cannot tell me that Toby is not a reference to his Paranormal Activity days. Never forget that the main entity in the Paranormal Activity franchise is named Toby, the least threatening name that I can think of. I'll be honest, going in the drop, I thought I had this whole movie figured out just from the trailer alone. It feels like a typical bait and switch thriller trailer plot when in reality, something far more elaborate is happening here. So if you're somebody like me who felt really underwhelmed watching that initial trailer, trust me, this one has a few tricks up its sleeve. This is a spoiler-free review, however, so you'll have to wait until this weekend to find out what I'm talking about. Everybody plays their part really well in this, but honestly, I think the side characters stand out the most. There's this goofy waiter named Matt who is so awkward he nearly had me in stitches every time he came to the table. It felt like a I think you should leave sketch in the best way possible.
What is your problem, man? Do you know how to fucking drive? No. What?
I think this movie's horror elements could be described as awkward too. As Violet is given these evil instructions, she has to find odd ways to either achieve these fucked up goals or keep the date going so she doesn't lose her target. The trailer and the plot description I literally just read already revealed that she's trying to kill her date Henry, and let me tell you, the guy is getting a bad vibe this entire movie. There are definitely certain moments of this one where you kinda have to suspend your disbelief a little bit to really follow through with this plot line, but if you can do that, it's very rewarding. This movie won me over personally with some excellent constant tension building and some pretty fantastic pacing that never left me bored. Drop is clearly inspired by movies like Wes Craven's Red Eye that does something similar, and if we're really gonna go balls deep into horror history here, movies like Drop, maybe Trap from M. Night Shyamalan last year, and especially Red Eye would not exist without any Hitchcock thrillers. Drop has this pretty obvious modern vibe while playing off of old school tension building practices. Like, yeah, this movie totally adopts the Hitchcock bomb philosophy, but we're also dealing with a plotline that centers around airdrop technology. I don't remember that in Rear Window. During a recent interview with Christopher Landon, he was talking about his departure from Scream 7, while also talking about the Wes Craven influence in this movie.
You know, I've said to people, like, I didn't get to make the Wes Craven movie that I thought I was gonna make, but I made the one I was supposed to make.
Speaking of Scream 7, this movie absolutely proves that Christopher Landon would have done a great job with a new sequel in that franchise. Hopefully one day he actually gets to helm a Scream film. I don't think there's a single director in Hollywood who understands Wes Craven's style as much as this guy. The technical aspects to this film perfectly create a dreadful atmosphere, which is another crucial element to this flick that is lost in so many thrillers I see every year just like this one. The slight Dutch angle on Violet when she receives a new haunting message, or these top-down shots that pull out really fast and leave our main character in the darkness, really representing the obscurity of the situation. The cinematic language alone in this one does more storytelling than the most recent Blumhouse releases. Yes, more turds from Bumhouse. The woman in the yard? More like the woman in the shart. Yeah, man, like, I didn't really care for that one either, but that was just really uncalled for. Sorry, not sorry. I guess my taste is just a little more sophisticated than yours. Anyways, I thought the airdrop killer concept for this movie may be handled poorly, feel kind of cheesy, maybe even a little gimmicky, but thankfully it's handled very well. The film basically approaches the drops as text messages and doesn't make a big stink about them past the goofy memes that kick off the horror elements. They also don't do that thing where we're constantly getting a close-up of the phone to see what the perpetrator sent next. Instead, they have a bunch of text pop up on the screen in like a scary font. At first, it's a little jarring. It almost feels like I'm watching a long trailer for this movie in the movie itself, but when you really think about it, they're able to achieve these much more cinematic shots opposed to just a real close-up on the phone that we just constantly keep cutting to. That's so boring! And this movie found a way to subvert that. I applaud it. They also utilized the fuck out of this restaurant setting. Again, sometimes you gotta suspend disbelief. But man, the more I watch and review horror films, the more I realize the importance of a good setting. I can't even begin to tell you how many horror movies I've turned off at this point for either not having an interesting setting or the situation created just did not hold my interest. This movie does both of those things immediately. I'm skipping over a very crucial element to the plot of this one because I don't want to give anything away, but there is a really nice theme going on through this movie that I enjoyed. I wish I could give you more detail than that, but there's a really nice little duality thing going on here. That's all I'm gonna say. But possibly my favorite thing that I actually can talk about regarding Drop is the pacing. In terms of concept, Drop isn't anything real special, but because of the way it lays out its mystery in a timely fashion, I never felt the drag of this movie. It's short, sweet, and never outstays its welcome. We need more short movies like this, man. Everything is trying to be like an hour 48. Drop has a single objective and it never tries to go beyond that, and that's perfectly fine. Not every every movie needs to start a gigantic IP that has 100 sequels and a connected universe. It is unbelievably refreshing to see a new movie in theaters that doesn't have that goal in mind. I have to admit, I was going in with pretty low expectations for this one. 2025 horror has been very up and down, but Drop really delivered and was probably the biggest surprise I've seen so far. Drop, huh? I can think of another four-letter word that this movie makes me think of. Crap! 2025 has been an exceptionally daft year for the horror film variety. Really? I mean, I thought Ash from Flying Lotus was pretty good. It was basically the Frozen dinner equivalent to Alien. Skip! What about Companion? Ex Machina, but make it forgettable. Pass. Hard Eyes? Another holiday-themed spyglass media slasher where the cops are the killers? Spoiler alert, I guess. The only original idea that company has ever had is to fire its lead from its flagship franchise. Okay, well, is there any movie you liked this year, Rex? Well, I guess I did enjoy this small short film that dropped on YouTube just at the top of the year. Something about a widowed father wearing a chicken mask and killing a bunch of people. Oh, really? You actually liked that? Psych. I'd have a better time watching old fried chicken get discarded in the dumpster at KFC. Okay, well, that's enough of that guy.
So the night is just gonna repeat itself.
I don't remember that happening last time.
The Until Dawn movie has just dropped. Will this satisfy fans of the video games, or is it just too much of a departure from what that original story was? Well, let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and I really do not have friends, I just have horror movies. I spent 6 hours at the theater yesterday watching new flicks. No one wanted to go with me. But let me tell you, I do have some new movie reviews coming out hopefully this weekend. We're kicking it off with Until Dawn for now, but members especially should stay tuned for some exclusive reviews. Thank you for your support, now let's get into this. The Until Dawn movie has been controversial since the first trailer released, showcasing an entirely different plot than what was featured in the game. At the time, I was defending this one because it seemed like an ambitious departure from what we had already seen, and honestly, I didn't want to see a one-to-one adaptation of that video game because I have already played through that story a bunch of different times. I was also excited to see David F. Sandberg return to horror after making that Shazam sequel that nobody saw. That's no fault to the Pony Smasher, however, because he's a great director. He helmed one of the most underrated 2010s jump scare flicks called Lights Out that has a sequel on the way apparently, and the scariest Conjuring spin-off, Annabelle Creation. That's a hill I will die on. So is his return to horror a smash or pass? I am so on the fence about this movie, man. Let's just get this out of the gate right now. Fans of the video game are not going to like this adaptation. One of the biggest cons I have for this flick is that it recycles elements of the video game and poorly handles most of them. The sister subplot from the video game is reworked here to be the motivation for why our group goes to that cabin, which by the way is a lame basic horror house in this movie. 0 out of 10 for the setting compared to the video game, which is this like cold, icy winter set cabin. That's so much better. And then everything with the sister, which is so crucial to that video game, is just treated as an afterthought throughout the rest of the runtime after the group gets there. The new characters here pale in comparison to the pretty in-depth players from the video game too. It's stiff competition, however, because the video game easily has a better cast featuring Rami Malek, Hayden Panettiere, and Peter Stormare. Sorry, but you're just not gonna top that unless you're Ready or Not 2, which I think has the best modern horror movie cast ever. Cannot wait for that one, wow. Peter Stormare, interestingly enough, does reprise his role here as Dr. Hill in once again a bit of a reinvention, but I'll save that for maybe some spoiler talk in the future. Now, while I wasn't crazy about most of the characters in this flick, I actually did find myself rooting for Abel and Nina a few times. Most of the cast purposely falls into dumb young adults who are completely ineffective when they're faced with a situation that is life or death, but Abel actually has a few rational thoughts throughout this flick, which cuts through the miasma of stupidity here like a knife. Max made me want to jump through this screen and strangle him like every single time he opened his mouth. I can forgive a character for making a stupid mistake at the beginning of a movie like this where they're constantly recycling and coming back, similar to Happy Death Day, you might say. But this character refuses to learn and continues to do stupid things throughout this entire movie. Oh my god, that was so frustrating. Now, as an adaptation of that standout video game, I think this adaptation fails. But as a horror movie fan, I think this movie wonderfully story answers the question of what if they made a sequel to Cabin in the Woods. There are a ton of interesting villains and horrifying situations that our admittedly bland cast of characters gets themselves into. Even the basic slasher that kicks off this movie's first night gets some really interesting kills, one involving an eyeball too. Y'all know how much I love a good eyeball kill. So while the characters and storylines here may not be as memorable as the game, the kills and the body horror certainly are. It makes this film a complicated one to review. I think if you're a fan of the video game and you want to see a movie similar to that, you will surely be disappointed. But if you're a horror movie fan, especially someone who likes Cabin in the Woods for its versatility like me, you may enjoy this one. I found it to be a really enjoyable popcorn movie that has some genuine scares and some unexpected jumps. The one positive I will give this movie on the video game adaptation side of things is the sort of meta commentary. What I mean by that is our characters are constantly trying to keep everybody alive, and there's even a scene where the remaining group has a disagreement about surviving the night. One member of their party has already been slain, and they argue that they should just restart so everyone can make it out. You can't tell me you didn't have that thought while playing through this game the first time. I was dead set on that the first time I played through Until Dawn, so that in my opinion has to be the best reference to the game here. Besides that, there are a few shallow attempts at connecting this new story to the game that felt surface level and obvious. This movie doesn't feel like an Easter egg hunt like some other video game movie adaptations out there, but at times it can feel like the people making this didn't have that same passion for the game that fans obviously do have. There's a spectrum to modern video game adaptations in my opinion. On one side of it is Five Nights at Freddy's, on the other is Until Dawn, and right in the middle is The Last of Us, which is easily the best thing I have seen so far. Sure, The Last of Us TV show definitely changes up a few things here, but it never strays away from what the core concept of that video game story is. Overall, I kind of enjoyed Until Dawn, but you might not. I could see this movie being a controversial talking point for a little while here, very similar to Halloween Ends, where it does have its fans, but it will certainly have its haters. Most will call it a swing and a miss, while a vocal minority will call it a diamond in the rough. I'm tentatively in that minority, but I completely and utterly understand the hate that this one is definitely going to receive.
Listen here, this ain't no house party.
Sinners is slaying at the box office right now, and it has resulted in a very interesting reaction from fans, critics, and everyone in between. Let's break down why some are excited, some are questioning the box office success of Sinners, and what this means for the future of original movies. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and I saw Sinners during its opening weekend. I haven't had the time to put out a full review on this video until now, because there's just so much to talk about regarding this flick, including its box office success and all the different things this one movie is able to hit on. I feel like I would be doing you a disservice if I just made a 5-minute long video talking about all the things I loved. There's so much more to Sinners than meets the eye. It's a movie that's had an instant cultural impact and may just counter what many studios are planning to do in the future. So let's get the stats out of the way first. After 2 big weekends at the theaters, Sinners has amassed $162 million, which is an incredible number for an original horror movie. This film was projected to have a pretty big opening weekend for an original. I mean, $30 to $40 million in both the US and Canada is a big number, but it flew past that and received $48 million. This is the best start for an original horror movie this decade. The last time we saw numbers this high was Jordan Peele's Us in early 2019. Sinners is even performing well in international markets, receiving $15.4 million during its opening weekend alone. I loved the film, but there are many reasons that contributed to this one having such huge success like this. First and foremost, Ryan Coogler has his fans, especially after the 2 Black Panther and 3 Creed films. There's obviously a little bit of crossover there, but this is also Ryan Coogler's first foray into horror, which makes this one really special. Speaking of which, the horror crowd absolutely loved this film, with mostly positive reviews pouring in. That word of mouth led to the second best Monday poll for an R-rated horror movie since It 2017. The film dropping on a holiday and spring break definitely led to some of the success as well, but it's the word of mouth that is driving people to the theaters for an original vampire flick. I never thought I would say those words on this page, especially considering how most vampire flicks from the last couple of years have bombed. I'll never forget you, Abigail. I was there day one, baby. Rest in peace, fallen soldier. What rubbish. Oh, this guy. Well, let's welcome esteemed film critic Rex Polymyth to the channel, everybody. Thank you for the mediocre introduction, Jacob. I have to say, all this box office praise seems a little premature considering the film hasn't even broken even yet. I noticed you didn't even mention the production budget for this one, or Ryan Coogler's unorthodox studio and streaming deals. That just seems really quick to judge, Rex. I mean, it exceeded expectations during its opening weekend. It still has multiple weeks to go in theaters and will certainly make money off of its VOD release considering all of the hype. Oh, Jacob. You truly have no taste, my friend. This From Dusk Till Dawn ripoff is just another flash in the pan. You know, I have this review you did back in 2019 on Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. What? Yeah, this review's pretty interesting because you praised the box office success of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood all the way back in 2019, even though it did make 10% less domestically than Sinners with the same budget. Is there anything you want to comment on there, Rex? Is there any reason you might have changed your tone in particular? I plead the fifth. Anyways, let's get back to this, shall we? The box office success for Sinners rages on in its second weekend, which is extremely noteworthy. Not only did the period piece end its first week with higher numbers than modern horror hits such as Get Out and The Conjuring, it only dropped 6% in its second weekend, reeling in another 45 million. Dude, this past weekend was bizarre for the box office. Sinners came out on top during its second week, even though we did have new horror releases last weekend, like Until Dawn, and in the second place is Revenge of the Sith during its re-release. That's insane. Not only is that another record-breaking stat for this instant classic, but it also throws a major monkey wrench into the studio model that many production companies are trying to sink into. There have been so many reports in the last few years that major studios will produce less original movies and continue to churn out films and pre-existing IPs. There's nothing wrong with franchise continuations. Ya boy is super excited for Final Destination Bloodlines that comes out in just a few weeks here. But if everything we get is just some sort of bland continuation to whatever big franchise from the past, we're just going to get more gray corporate sludge like the A Minecraft movie. Y'all really want to be hearing about another chicken jockey incident every weekend? It's movies like Sinners that keep originality alive. Whether you ended up liking the film or not, for whatever reason, if you financially supported this flick, you supported the future of original film in theaters. Box office success for a movie like this is way more valuable, in my opinion, than some sort of franchise IP impressing fans. Craig D. Lindsay from the AV Club even wrote, maybe a strong second weekend will make both Hollywood and media outlets realize this isn't a fluke, and that Coogler should join the untouchable ranks of superstar auteurs like Nolan, Tarantino, and Peele. I couldn't agree more. The guy has done so much in his career already, and he's kind of just getting started. I loved Sinners for a plethora of reasons. I don't even know where to start. It's one of those films that starts one way and transforms into a whole new beast halfway through. The drama that sets up this story is moody and atmospheric, yet constantly engaging. Each character is so rich with personality, especially both Smoke and Stack, played by Michael B. Jordan. It is so easy to fuck up twin characters, especially when they're played by the same actor like this, but Michael B. Jordan puts in the work and delivers two consistent performances under Ryan Coogler's precise direction. Smoke and Stack are similar, but they differ in ways that result in opposing fates for these two characters. My only complaint about this film is I feel like it goes on maybe a little long at the end, but I wouldn't change a thing about it considering the themes. That's the only time I really felt the drag of this one, getting to the mid-credit scene and then the post-credit scene, but it's so important to what the message of this film is ultimately trying to say. Some smaller details that I wanted to note is I loved both Delroy Lindo as Delta and Omar Miller as Cornbread. I think it really says something about a film when even the side characters can have such standout moments. Anyone walking out of this film can tell you how amazing Haley Steinfeld and Miles Catan are here, but even the side characters have some powerful and hilarious moments across the board. I feel like I learned so much about this universe from Delta's introduction, and then Cornbread was just splitting my sides the entire movie. I would hang out with Cornbread. We would be friends. Before the transformation, of course. I should say this now before I put any more spoilers in this video. Spoilers ahead! If you haven't seen Sinners yet, what are you doing? You probably have seen it considering those box office numbers though, let's be real. Even Lee Jun Lee as Grace has an extremely emotional moment once she realizes she can't get back to her daughter. I really thought the Chow family might have been one-note characters. They're going to push the plot forward by supplying things for the party, for the opening night essentially. But we get this really emotional scene where Grace's character is so terrified that her daughter is going to get attacked attacked by the vampires if they don't live through the night. It's heartbreaking. I loved it. Elephant in the room, many people have criticized this movie for not being a horror flick. I have some thoughts on this. I didn't particularly find Sinners to be terrifying, but that doesn't mean it's not horror. The horror genre has always been a little political. It's one of the many staples that make this genre the great thing that it is. For example, Brandon Cronenberg's 2023 feature Infinity Pool, commenting on tourists acting disruptive in other countries, or 1974's Black Christmas, standing the test of time with its progressive feminism. You can call it woke all you want, but by definition, horror has always been this way. Terror is just one attribute to what makes the horror genre the great thing that it is. Either way, it's more about the tension and suspense that Sinners constantly makes you sit in. Sinners starts off with Sammy coming home after the bloody night he's just had, ready to accept what his preacher father has always told him. That's symbolized by the guitar neck that he still has in his hands, holding it with a death grip, by the way. You are held in that tension for almost this entire flick, up until the end. Will he drop it and give up on his dreams, or not? The drama and character arcs are filled with tension, but I also just love the entire scene where more and more people are turning into vampires outside, and it's slowly becoming a problem for those who are trapped inside. And maybe this is just a personal thing, but I haven't seen a climax that exciting in a vampire flick probably since The Lost Boys. Another criticism of Sinners I've heard is that it's too much like other horror films, and yeah, it definitely draws from some of the giants out there like The Evil Dead, The Thing, and like Rex said earlier, From Dusk Till Dawn. But this movie obviously does something that none of those three flicks do. It's using the vampires as a metaphor for Jim Crow, and in a more general sense, the dangers of groupthink.
Oh, we heard tale of a party.
It makes me think the vampire and zombie genres only have a few hits here and there across the last 10 years. Why? Because they haven't had a whole lot new to say until now. Does it stand on the shoulders of giants? Absolutely it does. Most of the biggest horror movies of all time have. And even then, Sinners still takes some really ambitious swings that are so unique to just this film. The performance scene, for instance, is probably my favorite part of this entire flick, and it has almost nothing to do with horror in general. It just shows you how culture has evolved throughout the years. Maybe there wasn't some crazy practical effect or a kill that would challenge anything that Art the Clown has done so far, but it's that scene that is still the picture I have in my brain when thinking about this flick. Sinners is easily my favorite horror film of the year so far, and I hope it blows past some of the unreal expectations that many critics seem to have for it, for some reason.